I keep coming back to the gate log. Every night for 3 weeks, at exactly 3:47 a.m., someone badged into the facility. Same time, down to the minute, like it was set on a timer. I pulled the footage. The camera at the gate shows nothing. No car, no person. Just the gate arm lifting on its own and coming back down 4 seconds later. I still have the export on a flash drive in my sock drawer. I haven't watched it in 2 months. I don't think I'm going to. I want to write this down while I still remember all of it clean, because I can already feel parts of it going soft, like the details are trying to file themselves under, "You probably imagined that." I didn't imagine it. I have the paperwork. I have the log. I have a scar on my hand from a lock I never touched. This isn't a campfire story. I'm a 34-year-old guy from outside Dayton, Ohio. And until last spring, the scariest thing in my life was my cardiologist telling me to lay off gas station burritos. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything supernatural. I'm just telling you what happened at the storage place on Route 4. And you can decide what you think it means. So a little about me. I got laid off from my logistics job in January. Not dramatic, just a restructuring, which is corporate for we're keeping the guy who golfs with the VP. I burned through savings faster than I want to admit, and by March I was applying to basically anything that would take a warm body. My buddy Dale, who I've known since high school, worked part-time doing security rounds at a self-storage facility called Bishop's Mile Storage, and he mentioned they were hiring an overnight guy. Not even real security, just somebody to drive the golf cart around a couple times a night, check that gates were locked, log anything weird, and mostly just exist there so the insurance company was happy. $12 an hour, which is nothing. But it came with a little office trailer that had heat and a coffee maker and Wi-Fi. And honestly, I just needed something to fill the hole in my schedule before I lost my mind sitting at home, refreshing indeed. Dale put in a word with the owner, a guy named Roy Bishop, who inherited the place from his dad. Roy was maybe 60, wore the same flannel every time I saw him, and did not care about anything except the units being locked and the fence being locked. That was it. That was the whole job description he gave me. Keep it locked, keep it quiet, don't touch anybody's stuff. The facility itself was about 4 acres off a 2-lane road, maybe 15 minutes outside town, surrounded by corn on 2 sides and a drainage ditch on the other. 6 rows of units, lettered A through F, plus a scattering of the bigger drive-up units along the back fence for boats and RVs. Maybe 300 units total. Older place, built in the 90s, so half the doors had that orange rust bleeding down from the hinges, and the gravel between rows had gone soft in spots where water pooled. My shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 4 nights a week. Dale worked the other 3. We overlapped maybe once a week to hand off notes, and honestly, those first few weeks were some of the most boring nights of my life, which after everything I'd have taken back in a heartbeat if I could. The routine was simple. Clock in, do a walkthrough with a flashlight and note anything unlocked or damaged. Sit in the trailer and watch the 4 camera feeds Roy had set up, 1 at the front gate, 1 at the office, and 2 that swept back and forth across the rows on a timer, then do another walkthrough around 2 and again around 5. In between, I did homework for the online IT cert I was working through, or watched stuff on my phone with 1 earbud in so I could still hear if something happened outside. Most nights, nothing happened. A raccoon got into Unit B14 once, because the guy who rented it never actually put a lock on it. Just left the door on the latch, and I found it standing on top of somebody's dresser looking at me like I was the intruder. I logged it, texted Dale a picture. We laughed about it for a week. That was the level of excitement I was dealing with. I want you to understand how normal this all was, because that's what makes what came later feel so wrong. There was no ramp up in my head. It was boring, boring, boring. And then it wasn't. The first weird thing I actually wrote down was in my third week. And at the time, I didn't think much of it. I was doing my 2 a.m. walkthrough, going down row D, and the motion light at the end of the row, the one that's supposed to click on when the camera sweep or the golf cart trips, it didn't come on. Bulb's probably dead, I thought. I made a note to tell Roy. Not scary, just a dead bulb. Except the next night it was working fine. Then there was the smell. Middle of April, doing my walkthrough down row F, which is the row farthest from the office, closest to the drainage ditch and the tree line behind the property. I caught this smell like wet dog, real strong, right around Unit F22. I figured somebody's storage unit had something rotting in it, an old rug or something that got water damage. I made a note, moved on. Didn't think about it again until later. Around that same time, I started noticing the gravel in front of F22 looked disturbed some mornings, like somebody had been standing there a while, shifting their weight. I told myself it was probably just water pooling and refreezing, since we still had a couple cold nights left in April, and the freeze thaw does weird things to gravel. Reasonable explanation. I wrote it down anyway because that's what Roy wanted. Every little thing logged, and I was trying to be a good employee. The radio thing started maybe a week after that. I kept an old radio in the golf cart, mostly for the classic rock station out of Dayton. Just something to listen to while I did rounds. Started getting bursts of static right around row F, every single time, like clockwork. Then it'd clear back up once I got to row A or B. I figured there was some kind of interference, maybe a cell tower or a transformer near the tree line messing with the signal. Told Dale about it, and he just shrugged and said the radio in the cart was garbage anyway, which, fair, it probably was 15 years old. Then there was the thing with the cameras. Not every night, but a handful of times over about 2 weeks, the sweep camera covering row E and F would freeze up for a few seconds, just to stutter, then pick back up. I mentioned it to Roy, and he said the DVR was old and probably needed replaced, which, again, totally believable. This was not a high-tech facility. Things broke. I want to be honest that at the time, none of this felt sinister. It felt like what it was, an old, cheap facility with old, cheap equipment, run by a guy who didn't want to spend money on any of it. If you'd told me in April that any of this was building towards something, I would have laughed at you. I was more annoyed by it than scared. Annoyed that the radio didn't work right. Annoyed that I had to write camera glitch, row E and F, approx 2:14 a.m. in the log for the 4th time that month. The gate log thing started right at the end of April. I noticed it first by accident, going back through old entries, because Roy asked me to pull a report for insurance about a fender bender some renter had in the lot. I was scrolling through weeks of badge-ins, and I saw at 3:47 a.m. badge number 000, every single night going back as far as the system kept records, which was 90 days. Badge 000 isn't a real badge. Every renter gets an actual number, 4 digits, starting at 1001. Employees are 3-digit codes. 000 shouldn't exist in the system at all. I brought it up to Roy the next time I saw him during a shift overlap. He got kind of quiet and said it was probably a glitch in the software, that the company who installed the gate system went out of business years ago and nobody really knew how to fix bugs in it anymore. He said don't worry about it. I remember him not quite looking at me when he said it, but I chalked that up to Roy just being an awkward guy in general. He wasn't much of a talker. That should have been my first real red flag. It wasn't. I logged it and moved on. same as everything else. May is when it stopped being explainable. At least, stopped being explainable in a way that let me sleep during the day without checking my phone every 20 minutes for a text from Dale. First thing was small. I was doing my midnight round and found Unit F22's lock sitting on the ground in front of the door, unlocked, but the door itself still down and latched. Nothing missing that I could tell through the gap, but the lock wasn't cut or broken. It was just sitting there in the gravel like somebody set it down. I called the number on file for the renter, a guy named Curtis Whitfield, and got no answer. Left a voicemail. Locked a spare padlock on it myself and noted the whole thing in the log. Took photos with my phone for my own records because something about it bugged me enough that I didn't fully trust the official paperwork anymore. 2 nights later, the spare lock was gone. Not broken, gone. Like someone had a key or knew how to pick it clean, no marks on the hasp at all. I started paying way more attention to row F after that. I'd do extra passes, shine my flashlight down between the units. Feel a little stupid doing it because there was never anything there. Until the night there was. I was maybe 20 feet from F22, cart parked, walking the row on foot because the cart's headlight had started flickering and I didn't trust it. And I saw footprints in the gravel dust that hadn't been there 10 minutes before. On my last pass. Not shoe prints. Bare feet, I think, or something close to it. Going from the tree line at the back fence straight up to F22 and stopping. No prints leading away. I stood there with my flashlight probably longer than I should have. Just staring at them, telling myself I miscounted my passes. Telling myself the wind did something to the gravel. Telling myself a dozen things that didn't actually add up if I thought about them for more than 5 seconds. I did not sleep well that day. I told Dale about it during our handoff that week, and he didn't laugh at me, which honestly scared me more than if he had. He got quiet and said he'd noticed some stuff too, that he never mentioned because he figured I'd think he was losing it. He said sometimes on his shift he'd hear something moving in the corn on the east side. Real slow, deliberate, not like a deer at all. Deer bolt, and this didn't bolt. It just kept pace with him if he walked the fence line. He said one night he heard what sounded like someone breathing right on the other side of the chain link. And when he pointed his flashlight, there was nothing. But the corn stalks right there were still moving even though there was no wind that night. We agreed we should tell Roy everything. All of it together, in case it was worse than either of us thought alone. Roy did not react the way I expected. He didn't dismiss it. He got this look on his face like a man bracing for something he'd been waiting on. And he told us reluctantly, picking his words real careful, that his dad, who built the facility back in the 90s, used to talk about someone who comes around the property, and that his dad's solution had always been simple. Leave F22 alone, don't rent it out, don't go poking around it at night, and whatever you do, don't open it after dark. Roy said he'd kept that rule his whole time running the place, and it had worked fine until Curtis Whitfield rented F22 8 months ago, against Roy's better judgment, because Roy needed the money that quarter, and Curtis paid cash for a year up front. I asked Roy what was actually supposed to be in there, in F22, that made it so special. Roy said his dad never told him, just told him to leave it be, and that this was a, quote, leave it be kind of situation, the same as it had always been. I want to tell you, that was the moment I quit. It wasn't. I needed the paycheck, and Roy offered both me and Dale a $2 raise on the spot to keep doing what we were doing and just, quote, not engage with it. 12 became 14 an hour, which doesn't sound like much, but at the time felt like it mattered. I told myself the smart move was to just avoid row F as much as I could without technically slacking on the job, log what I had to log and get through my shifts. That worked for about 10 days. Then Curtis Whitfield stopped answering his phone entirely. His voicemail box filled up and the payment on his unit bounced. Roy, in his infinite business wisdom, told me and Dale that, per the contract, after 30 days of non-payment, he was allowed to open the unit and inventory the contents before auctioning it off. And that he wanted it done during the day, obviously, with both of us there for, in his words, extra hands, which I now understand meant extra witnesses, or extra bodies if something went wrong. And I genuinely don't know which he meant more. We did it on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of June. Bright out, birds going. The most normal-looking day you could ask for. Roy brought bolt cutters, even though the lock I'd put on was long gone, and whatever was on there now looked homemade. A chain wrapped through the door track a few times and knotted. No actual lock at all, like someone inside had rigged it shut, rather than someone outside locking it up. That detail bothered me more than almost anything else that happened. It meant the door had been secured from a direction that didn't make sense for a renter storing furniture. Roy cut the chain. The door screeched going up. Hadn't been oiled probably ever, and the smell hit us before the light did that same wet dog smell from months back. Except concentrated, awful, mixed with something sweeter underneath it that I don't have a good comparison for. Dale gagged and stepped back. I kept my hand over my mouth and looked in. It wasn't furniture. There was almost nothing that looked like a normal storage unit at all. The walls were lined with what I first thought were blankets nailed up, but on closer look were pelts, animal hides, a lot of them, deer mostly, I think, tacked up in overlapping layers like insulation. In the back corner there was a nest, no better word for it. A mound of insulation pulled out of the walls and mixed with more hides and torn up cardboard, big enough for something the size of a person to curl into. And there were marks scratched into the drywall, rows and rows of them, hundreds, like someone had been counting days. Except they didn't run in one clean line, they wrapped around the whole unit, floor to ceiling in places. Some so high up, I don't know how anyone could have reached without climbing. On the floor near the door, half buried in loose insulation, was a spiral notebook. Water damaged, most pages stuck together. Roy wouldn't touch it. I did, stupidly, peeling back the front few pages that weren't glued shut. The handwriting was Curtis's. I recognized it from his rental application. But it got worse page by page, more jagged. Some pages just the same 3 or 4 words over and over. Things like, "It lets me stay if I feed it, and the gate opens for it, not for me," which I read out loud once and immediately wished I hadn't, because saying it in that room made it feel like it was true rather than the ramblings of a guy who'd clearly lost his mind. There was no sign of Curtis Whitfield. Not a body, not blood, nothing like that. Just his notebook, his stuff mixed in with things that weren't his. And that nest. Roy called it in as an abandoned unit with possible animal infestation, which technically wasn't a lie. And the county sent a guy out who wrote it up as raccoons or a large stray dog. Said the pelts were probably old moving blankets that degraded, and honestly did not seem to want to spend more than 15 minutes on site. I didn't argue with him. Some small part of me didn't want to be the guy insisting there was something worse than raccoons living in a storage unit on Route 4. We cleaned the unit out over the next 2 days, during daylight only, Roy's insistence, and I made sure I was never alone in row F, even in broad daylight. Roy padlocked F22 for real this time, industrial lock, and said he was done renting it permanently, which was the first time I saw him actually spend money on the place instead of avoid spending it. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 nights after we cleaned it out, doing my normal 2 a.m. round, I heard something moving along the fence line by the drainage ditch, same slow, deliberate pace Dale described, keeping time with my walking. I did not investigate. I got in the golf cart and drove straight back to the office trailer and sat there with the door locked until my shift ended, watching the camera feed of Row F the whole time, watching nothing happen, which somehow felt worse than if something had. The badge log kept showing 000 at 3:47 a.m. every night for another full week after we cleared the unit. Then it just stopped. No explanation. It hasn't shown up since, as far as I know, though I stopped checking as obsessively once I started sleeping better. About 2 weeks after the clean-out, I was doing a normal walkthrough. Nothing unusual when I went to check the lock on F22 out of habit. It was locked exactly like it should be. But there was a fresh scratch on the metal door. Low down, about knee height, 3 parallel lines dragged through the paint down to bare metal. I have a photo of it on my phone. I didn't touch it. I logged it, same as everything else, and told myself an animal did it, which by that point I didn't fully believe, but needed to say out loud anyway. I put in my 2 weeks not long after that. Told Roy it was because I got an IT job, which was half true. I did get an interview lined up, but honestly I would have quit either way. Dale stuck it out a few more months before he left too, for what he told me were similar reasons, though we don't really talk about specifics anymore. It's easier not to. I don't work there anymore, obviously. I've got the IT job now, normal hours, normal office, and most days I genuinely don't think about Bishop's Mile storage at all. But every so often something will bring it back, a smell like wet dog on a hot day, a radio glitching out in the car for no reason, and I'll feel that same cold drop in my stomach I felt looking at those footprints going up to F22 and nowhere else. I called Roy a few months back, told myself it was just to check in, but really I wanted to know if F22 was still empty. He said it was, said he'd never rent it again, said the scratches on the door show up every couple months no matter how many times he paints over them. He also mentioned, almost like an afterthought, that badge number 0000 came back once, a single night about a month ago, 3:47 a.m., same as always, then nothing since. He said he doesn't check the gate log anymore. Told me it's easier not to know. I never found out what happened to Curtis Whitfield. He's not listed as a missing person anywhere I could find. No obituary either, like he just stopped existing the day his unit went quiet. I think about that notebook line sometimes, about the gate opening for something and not for him. I don't have a theory that makes it make sense. I'm not sure I want one. I still have that flash drive with the gate footage in my sock drawer. Gate arm lifting on its own. 4 seconds. Coming back down. I've told myself a dozen times I'll delete it. Or finally sit down and watch the whole thing slow, frame by frame. See if there's something in the corner of the frame I missed the first time. I haven't done either yet. Some nights I think about that unit sitting there behind Roy's industrial padlock. Empty, waiting. And I wonder if, quote, leave it be was ever really a rule that worked, or if it just bought his dad, and then Roy, and then me and Dale, a little more time before whatever it is decided to come back around.